Some people burn the candle at both ends. Today, I thought we would try to forge weld the Pulaski at both ends. Welcome to Black Bear Forge, where I hope to educate, inspire, and spark the imagination of anyone who is interested in the traditional art and craft of blacksmithing. So the time has come to try and get the tool steel inserts or overlays on the Pulaski. I think I'm going to start with the one that goes on the adze end. I've already got that one cut and it's been polished up on the back side, so I don't have any scale. And I'm going to tack weld that on here so it stays put in the fire. I'm also going to weld a handle on the blade end that will be cut off later, and that'll just make it easier to work with so I don't have to wrestle this big heavy odd shaped thing in a pair of tongs that doesn't really fit. So I'm going to head over to the welding table and do that real quick. Well, we've got that welded on there. Just a couple of tack welds. They're going to get ground off when we're all done. Same thing with the handle. It'll get cut off, ground free. There won't be any remnant of the electric weld left when we're done. So we need to bring this up to welding heat. And because it's a fairly big thing, we're going to do that in the gas forge. And the chili forge is a great thing to do this in. It easily gets to welding heat for this. Because the chili forge is so loud, I'm not going to do much talking about what I'm doing during the video. I will try to do a voiceover if necessary after the video. Mostly this is just bring it up to heat and forge weld it. Do that over and over again until I'm sure it's done. Well, we're going to start with a little bit of flux. I'm going to start with borax. I like borax for these bigger welds because it really melts and flows down inside the weld joint. As we start to seal this up, I'll be more likely to go to the Iron Mountain Flux because I don't need it to flow so much, and I probably don't need to use as much either. So it'll be nice to have that option of fluxes depending on what I need. But once we get the majority of the welding done, we just don't need that much. This is just several quick light passes. There's no reason to keep working as it cools down. Get it right back up to welding heat and come right back at it again. Just looking in the forge there. Move back about a half a hammer's width from the first pass. Work from one side to the other and then back. Doesn't hurt to work both sides of it, although it's probably already welded in that area. By working the sides, you actually upset the weld area just a little bit, and that allows it to seal up a little bit better right around the edges. Wire brushing, a little more flux, and third pass of welding. Don't trust the color you're seeing on the video to be the color that I'm welding at. The camera adjusts for the light, and it's really deceptive what you're seeing on film versus what I actually see in person. This is welding. You can tell just by looking up. The part that's lifting up has not been hammered yet, so it's not welded. But the rest of that is not moving, so it has stuck down. It is welded. just a process of repetition. We're going to do the same thing over and over again. Typically I will wire brush and flux about every other heat. There's enough flux in there that you don't have to flux every heat on a weld like this. It's stuck in there. Just closing that up so that it's easier to weld when I bring it back out. This is the hardest part to seal up, is this very little bit on the end here. We give it a lot of extra attention, do several heats, and get it in over the horn where it can support it a little bit better. Sorry that didn't show in the video. And now it's just mostly refining the adze blade. The weld is largely done. Maybe a little bit of welding to do, and I'll work this at welding heat, each heat at this point, until I'm sure it's welded. It's just almost completely shaped. It must see a little bit of something that still needs to be tacked down there, so move more flux back to the fire. Working with the peen of the hammer, you can get right into where it needs it and really concentrate the blows to weld it well. Really, at this point, I'm very satisfied with the way things are going. I think we'll move out and show the horn of the anvil a little bit better here in a second. Take a measurement, see if it's getting close to long enough. Kind of into the forging and shaping now. Going to go into the little giant. Guess we weren't going to show working over the horn again. Sorry about that. The width isn't bad on this. It mostly just needs to be drawn out and thin. It's a fairly heavy section right now. Using this double diagonal peen hammer. It's a 4-pound hammer. One peen is good for drawing out lengthwise, which I'm using mostly here. And now I've gone to the other peen, which is good for spreading widthwise. So it's a pretty handy hammer to have for this. 4-pound hammer is awfully heavy. I don't swing it for very long because it gets really too much, too fast. So it's hard on your elbow to do too much of this, but it does help get this done, especially when my bigger power hammer is still down for repairs. Just use whatever hammer seems to be the most appropriate to get the job done at the moment. Here I've gone to a big rounding hammer to kind of spread equally and smooth things out. Get rid of the peen marks from that double diagonal peen hammer and help smooth everything out. Again, it's a fairly heavy hammer, so I'm not going to swing it for very long. It does have a longer handle, so you can't get away from the heat. A lot of radiant heat comes off of a big tool like this while you're forge welding it. Just way too hot to do this without gloves, but you have more control and better grip on the hammer without gloves. hand just can't stand that kind of heat. It's hot enough with the gloves on. I think that's pretty much it for the adze end. Well, I think we pretty well have it here. The weld looks good. If you draw this out and spread it, if the weld's not good, you'll know it. There'll be some more cleaning up to do after we're all done, I think, but for the most part, I'm very happy with the way that went. We've got it to about the size I want it. It is 6.5 inches long and 3.5 wide. I may work on a little bit more in the final finishing stages of the tool, but for now I think we're in pretty good shape. It needs to cool, then I will cut the handle off, weld it to the back side, then we'll start prepping the front edge for the tool steel that goes in there. Well, that is hot work. Running the forge at full tilt for about an hour is pretty warm, even though it's the coolest day we've had in a couple of months today. It's only about 70 degrees today, so it was an ideal day to do this. But I'm going to let that in cool slowly. I'm just going to leave it sitting in the forge as the forge cools down. That'll do something similar to normalizing or annealing, somewhere in between. De-stress that steel, make sure that I don't put any stresses in it. The last thing I want to do is try to cool it off in a hurry so I can get to the other side today. I'm just going to save that. I'll do that tomorrow. It'll probably be part of this same video. Depending on how long this looks, I may split it into two, but I'll look at that this evening and see if it's going to be one video or two videos. So I hope you're following me so far. Hopefully just in a few seconds we will pick that up and start working on the other end of the Pulaski. Did you miss me? Hopefully I wasn't gone too long. Well, I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. The weld is nearly invisible for most of it, and in the few places you can just barely see where the edges have come together. It's not really a cold shut, it's just kind of a visible line where the edges come together. I think all that'll end up being ground out in the long run, so I think we're going to have a nearly invisible weld on the finished product. I don't mind a few telltale signs that it was forge welded. In fact, I kind of like that, as long as it's not a cold shut that's going to cause a problem. But we've got this pretty much right to the size we want. It'll need to be reshaped. So we need to work on the actual axe end now. I'm going to cut this handle off. I'm going to weld it to the back end so we can have it to work again. That worked out really well for this first end, so we're going to do it again for this side. And it's worth the trouble to do that. So let's go back to the welding table and weld this on. So we now have a Pulaski on a stick. If you'll remember previously, I have bandsawn a kerf into the cutting edge of the axe. So our first task is going to be to heat this up, stand it on end in the vise, and split this open with a chisel. Since it's never been worked at welding heat, it should have just opened right up, and then we'll be ready to insert the carbon steel cutting edge. 5160 is what this is, and is what this overlay was. Apparently I should have done this before I put the handle on. Handle touches the ground and this sticks way up in the air. This will work. Just open this up with a chisel. And if the slot's not deep enough, you can chisel it a little bit deeper, but this one is plenty deep. Just want to make sure it's open all the way to the base of the slot so we get the cutting edge all the way down in there. You use the chisel to kind of lever the ears back. We're going to draw this out and scarf the edges next. Do this just right here at the anvil. You're just doing just the very edge so it blends with the tool steel where it overlaps. We'll clean this up a little bit at the grinder next, but it needs to cool for that. Well, that's in there. I'm going to close these ears up a little bit. Not completely yet. I want to flux it first. To get way down in here, I like to start with borax. It flows and melts better than some of the other fluxes. It's also harder on the lining of the forge. So I probably just do this the one time, and you won't see me flux every time, mostly because I just won't show it for the camera, but sometimes I just flux every other heat. But as it gets closed up, I'll go to the Iron Mountain Flux. Now I'll go ahead and close this up very gently just to seal out any air gaps. And back in the fire and up to welding heat. Just like when we were doing the adze blade, we are going to take lots of
little heats or short duration heats, and work from the very back of the cleft and seal that up first, squirting all the flux and scale out with each heat and each pass. Each time I advance about half a hammer's width. I work one side, flip it over, work the other side, advance the hammer a half a hammer's width. And I do that usually 2 heats and then wire brush and flux. Use Borax for the initial fluxing, like I said, and now I'm just using the Iron Mountain Flux mostly. It's easier to apply with the squirt bottle for one thing, but you also don't need it to flow deep down into the seam because the seam's pretty well closed up at this point. Again, we're upsetting the edge profile a little bit. That helps seal up the seams. Just a lot of repetition, a lot of back and forth. There's no reason to keep working it as it starts to cool down. Get it back in the fire, keep it at welding heat. You kind of see a transition point at the edge there where the mild steel and the tool steel switch. And that will get refined several more times here. Besides upsetting to help seal the edge of the weld, we're really shaping the blade at this point. And it's amazing how much easier this shapes at a welding heat than at the heat most people forge at. A lot of people forge just pretty darn cold. I'm guilty of it most of the time. And forge welding these tools, working at a welding heat, really does make the forging go easier. Use a little less flux each time because I've got much less to seal up. At this point I'm pretty much just working right at that scarp at the edge of the axe blade, sealing it up to the tool steel. Welding the handle onto this really gives it much more control, and it's way better than trying to hold this in tongs. I doubt that I have any pair of tongs that is just perfect for holding this, so it would be kind of fussy and fiddly and want to fall out of the tongs, so this handle's really paid off. Had one little place that looked like it needed to be sealed up better, and I wanted to make sure I got flux all the way down in it, so I went back to the Borax. Since I had that in my hand, I just went ahead and used it. A lot of what's going on now is not so much welding as it is just shaping. I'm back to that 3.5 pound rounding hammer. Does a real good job for this. This is the hammer made by Stuart Shirley. It's one of my favorite hammers, even though it's too heavy to swing all the time. Here's that double diagonal peen, using it to spread the actual edge of the blade. Really a good hammer for that. I made that hammer probably 25 years ago, before I had the power hammer. Of course, I was younger and could swing it better then. Still a useful hammer. I still use it quite a bit. Sometimes power hammer is not a substitute for hand forging. black head up on the anvil. The handle's a little long and it's in the way. I keep bumping into stuff. That way I can flatten the back out a little bit.
We are certainly getting there. Here's my sample. This one's actually a little bit longer, which I kind of like. This one's 4.5 inches wide at the cutting edge. This one's about 4 3/4, so I have plenty of room to grind the profile a little bit nicer. This one is about 4 inches from the front of the eye. This one's about 5. So if I need to grind this back, I can. I have plenty of tool steel there. Boy, this thing's getting hot. My hammer hand, even way back here on this longer handled hammer, is just boiling from the radiant heat that comes off of something like that at welding heat. But I think we are awfully darn close. I don't know if there'll be any more forge welding to do on this or not. I see a little gap right there at the very base of that cleft. I suppose we're going to try and weld that shut.
I'm going to use a little ball peen hammer here and try and get right down where that isn't quite sealed. It's right where the split and the tool steel insert come together, so I'm driving material down in there that'll help fill that void a little bit, and then I've got something that I can actually forge weld on the next pass. And this really does seem to seal it up pretty well. Really pretty well got it. I might alter the profile of the back just slightly, but it's better to do that than it is to have a hole in there. The hole was never going to hurt anything. It didn't go very deep, but it might allow moisture in, which would promote rust, and there's no reason to do that. So it's worth taking a little extra time to try and seal that up. Now I'm going to go ahead and drift the eye. It's going to need a lot more drifting ultimately, but I just want to get it open back up. I've really done a lot of squishing and distorting of the eye throughout all this. Because the axe profile has changed so much, I've got to move it around different parts of the handle to support different things while I drift it. This will be easier to do once we get the handle out off of it later. But I want to do just a couple of passes of drifting now. And some more straightening. Always straightening. And drift it from the other side. I use these long drifts so I can actually hold onto the drift as a handle while I'm drifting. So it's a little bit floppy and inconvenient while I'm holding onto this other longer handle. Which is why I'll cut the handle off before we do any more drifting. I just wanted to get that eye open back up and make it look a little better before I cut the handle off. Just get it as straight as I can and we'll pretty much be done with it.
Well, I think that is pretty much it for now. Just want to make sure it's pretty straight. There will be one more round of heats after I cut the handle off and do a little bit of grinding just to refine the final shape and the curve of the adze and all that. But I'd like it to be pretty straight now. Then we'll also finish the eye and drift it with the handle off. The handle's kind of in the way to drift it efficiently. But that is what we're after. Well, now we're just going to let that cool off and normalize. I think I'll put it back in the forge so it normalizes nice and slowly, or comes close to annealing. Then the next step will be a little bit of grinding. Well, our Pulaski is all welded up. We have very little sign of a weld seam on the blade. That'll probably all grind out as I clean it up a little bit. Pretty typical to see just a little shadow line anyways. And I have just a little overlap on this adze overlay where things just didn't quite line up a little bit, so there's a little ledge there. It's not a cold shut, not going to cause any problems. Again, it'll probably get ground out because it's just not that big a deal in the first place. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to profile grind, clean this up, take a closer look at the welds, make sure there's no cold shuts or seams along the edges. Then it'll be back to the forge one more time to finish drifting the eye, get that just right, make sure everything is straight, put the little bit of a curve in the adze blade. You can see the sample that I'm using has a curve in it. Get all that done, normalize it again, then it'll be time to harden, temper, and give it its final grind and sharpening, and then put a handle on it. Whether we'll do all that in one more video or two more videos, I'm not sure, but I'll probably do most of the profile grinding before we do the next video. It's just me standing at a grinder, and then we'll do that final forging and drifting as a video, and then we'll see where we go from there. This is very similar in size to the one I've been using as the sample. It still weighs a little bit more. It's about 4 or 5 ounces heavier. So by the time we're all done grinding, it's going to be very close to the same size. Real pleased with the way it's going. This hasn't really been a tutorial or a how-to video, but hopefully you've learned something along the way and at least been entertained by it and have enjoyed the process as much as I have. So I'm going to get back to work. I'm going to finish grinding this. I've got some more hinges I'm working on this afternoon. Hopefully I can get those out this evening. I hope you've enjoyed this series of videos, enjoyed this video, and can give it a thumbs up. Love it if you hit that subscribe button so you know when we come up with another video here on Black Bear Forge. Probably be in the next day or two. In the meantime, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends, then make time in your day to get out to your shop. But stay safe, do wear your safety glasses, and we will see you for the next one.